screen's in the way, feel free to move if needed. Okay, so where that comes into play now, the zero product property, either one or the other equals 0. So that means if I'm looking at a problem like this, these two are being multiplied together and they equal 0. So that means either a plus 2 equals 0 or 2a plus 3 equals 0. These are already factored for me, so I didn't have to do that step. And those become very easy equations for us to solve. So we move this 2 over. So we find out a could be -2. Or also a -3/2. So two pretty simple equations that I need to solve once they're in that factored form. Now example 2 is a little bit different. This is one where there's a, we call it a GCF factor. There's a common factor that was just taken out in the front. That's still considered like a term. So this 4m could equal 0, or the m minus 9 could also equal 0. So we're going to set each of those equal to 0. So this is being multiplied, so we're going to divide by 4. So m could equal 0 is one option, or m could also equal 9. So we get two answers, again, because we're solving a quadratic. A quadratic has a squared in the equation, and so it could have up to 2 solutions. All right, so I'm going to kind of show you guys how that we go through that from the start. So our solving quadratics, with my algebra kids, a lot of times I just give them little steps that go with it. It doesn't hurt for us to do that as well. So if you look at these equations, the first thing we need to do is the equation needs to equal 0. So in order to work with this zero product property, the equation can't equal 5x, like in example 3 there. So we have to make the equation equal 0. And so we'll do that first. So we want it in the form, standard form where it equals 0. I prefer to have a be positive if it's possible. So I said make a greater than 0 if at all possible, just to make it a little bit easier for us. So like in example 3 here, I need to move this 5x over so that it equals 0 to begin with. And again, I know you guys have done this before. I'm sorry if you feel like this is beneath you, but again, I tried teaching this in my other class with using these concepts, and it was really, it was more painful than I recall, so, or than I thought it was going to be. So now once I'm there, if I can factor, I want to factor. Now I am going to point out that if you want to try, always look for a GCF first. And you might have forgot what that was. That was just basically a greatest common factor, something that goes into all the terms. Every once in a while, that's going to be a helpful step for you. So look for a GCF. There is no common factor among x squared, -5x, and 6. So then we move on. So then we're going to factor using our FOIL. So using one of our 2 methods we just learned. So now this is that easy type of factoring. We want to multiply to get +6, but add to get -5. And we get there. -3, -2, they both need to be negative to make that a +6. And then the 2 negatives will become a -5. And then once we're at this step, now we're ready to set each factor equal to 0. So x ends up being 3, and x ends up being 2 after all that. So I want to give you guys a minute to look at the bottom couple. Those should be pretty straightforward. We'll flip to the back side where they'll get tougher in a little bit here, but the bottom two should be similar. And again, I'm hoping that you guys feel comfortable with it. It's just we need to know how to use this with other types of problems when they get more complicated. So unless you're really good at it this way, it's really confusing. So that's why we're slowing us down here a little bit. So if you want to look at examples 4 and 5, that would be great. Tyler, you were able to catch up on this. You're good. examples to work okay? You're right? All right. So I'm going to kind of run through them kind of quickly unless we have any issues. So On number 4, I think it's easier to, even though initially pi doesn't seem easier, I think it's better to move the 8x and the 9 over. The reason for that is I want my x squared to be a positive. So if I move the x squared to be a negative, that's one more layer of difficulty to this. It's possible still to do it that way, but it's probably easier to make x squared positive. So that's a strategy that I would suggest. Then once I'm here, I can just do x and x, multiply to get negative 9, add to get negative 8. I know this is always a struggle for my algebra students. They always forget about the factor that's a 1. This is that case. So it's negative 9, positive 1 that would multiply to give me a negative 8. But then when I go to solve this, it's always the opposite signs on these. So hopefully that went okay there. And then in example 5, same idea, I would move everything over to the left side. So this would be an x squared minus 3x, and then the 5 and the 1 would become a negative 4. And so again, I believe it's a similar circumstance. We have negative 4, positive 1. And so just getting comfortable with that. Now when we flip to the other page, the next side, you're going to notice now it gets into those more complicated factoring problems. And again, if you want to, I can show the method I've used over here at just another time, or another time or two, or however much you guys want to see it. I don't mind showing it. But these on the back are not quite as straightforward, but at the same time, I know you've done them. I mean, like, it's not like I'm thinking that you don't know how to do this at all. So we still do need to make them equal 0 first. And again, I'll kind of give you guys time. Those of you guys who do the guess and check method probably can work through it. And then those of you guys who want to see it this way, I can show it that way as well. I'm going to move the 10x over. So I want to factor this, and I know it's going to be like a 3x squared to start off with, and then our 3x and an x somehow. But again, I can show that other way over here if you're interested. So I'll put it up here if that's able to. I should be able to see that. There's like a glare from the board. Okay, so I'll do that over here if you want to see it that way. If not, no worries either way. So I'm using this method. I'm multiplying to get the number on top, so 24x squared. In the middle, I put the negative 10x. Want to multiply to get a positive 24. Add to get a negative 10. So negative 6x, negative 4x are my two factors. So I rewrite this equation that looked like this before. I'm going to rewrite it with these two in the middle instead of the 10x. If I do that, then I can group this. I take out a 3x out of those two. I take out a negative 4. So that's what I ended up with. I think that it should have been what you guys had on the other side here. So those of you guys who did the guess and check method, we want to get it factored. So we know it has to be 3x times x. I want to multiply to get 8. But when I do my O and I term, those middle two terms, I want it to end up being a negative 10. So this is, I'm going to do 4 and 2 then. So if I have 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times, 4 times 1 is going to be 4, and then I want them both to be negative. So once I factor it this way, then I have to set each of those factors equal to 0. This one's really easy. X is 2. And then over here, and then 4/3. Is this coming back to you guys if you didn't remember it before? No? No, Abby's like, no. Still not good. All right, let's make it equal 0 first. Oops, I'll move this 18 right away. All right, so in this one, I have 2x squared plus 9x minus 18. Again, I put it in the standard form, so in order of highest power down to lowest. Abby, which one are you feeling? Do you like the guess and check?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try that. So I'll just kind of go through. I'm gonna do some wrong on purpose here just to kind of remind you guys how this works. So we do 2x and then x. I'm hoping I'll do it wrong. Try to make sure I don't remember correctly on mistake. So I want to multiply to get 18. So let's do, I don't know, let's do 9 and 2. Just, like I said, I know this one doesn't work. So if I do 9 and 2, one of them has to be negative, one has to be positive. What we care about is the O and I terms. So I have to look at the outside and then the inside. And I look at this, and this is 4x, this is 9x. 4x and 9x together are never going to equal 9x. So I have to like cross that one out. It's not possible. So I checked, and you have to keep kind of checking it to see what works for it. And so I'm thinking about 2 times something and then 1 times something. I want them to add to give me 9. And I've done this method for so long that I'm not really even good at doing this in my head as well as I am the other one. It's probably going to be 6 and 3, I'm assuming. Or maybe not. No? Is it 18 and 1?
No, it's 6 and 3.
It's 6 and 3? So,
I didn't mind.
oh yeah, 6. Okay, there it is. So 6 times 2 is 12. That's that outer term. And then if I do 3 times 1, it's going to be 3. So 12 minus 3 will give me 9. So I know I have to do the minus 3 and the positive 6. So 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times x is just negative 3. So 12 minus 3. And again, like I said, I've always done this method for so long now that I have a hard time doing it by the guess and check method, unless it's really obvious. So you kind of have to keep playing with it. The 2 terms you care about are the outer and the inner terms. So you want them to give you that middle term. So this number is gotten found from the outer and inner terms together. So we get x is 3/2, and then x is also negative 6. All right, the next 2 are a little bit different, and you might have forgotten that this is a thing. And this is kind of that step 2 that I've written down before, and I said that comes up sometimes, so looking for that GCF is a really good thing to watch out for, and you might have just forgot about this. So, and this is probably the first type of factoring you learned about. But sometimes when it doesn't take as much thinking, we don't remember it. We didn't spend as much time on it. So, I still want these to equal 0 first of all. So I'm going to make them equal 0. So I'm going to move the 14R over. not going to do this 2 parentheses on this one, because this one is, you're not going to be able to make it work with the reverse FOIL, like the 2 sets of parentheses. This is the kind where you want to look for a common factor first. What goes into both of these terms? R. So I'm just going to pull an R out of that equation. So I'm pulling an R out, and yeah, if you use the other method, it's okay. I mean, it probably didn't work very well. I guess the moral of that story. It probably just didn't work very well for you. So we're pulling an R out of each of these. So if I take an R out of that, I'm just left with an R. If I take an R out of this one, I get minus 14. And again, this looks like the second warm-up question we had now. Or not, no, like example 2 we had on the other side, where this could equal 0 or that could equal 0. So R could be 0, and if you go back to the original problem, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. 0 squared would equal 14 times 0. Yeah, that seems logical. And then this one, we move that 14 over, so R would be 14. So if you tried that other method on this one, that would cause you some issues. This is the GCF factoring we want to do here. So I'll give you guys a second to try this one if you haven't done that. And then examples 10 and 11 you can either do by factoring or by square roots. So it says solve by any method, so if you prefer using square roots, that's fine. You can also factor. So on 9 you want to look for a GCF. So what's common that goes into both of those? So I'm going to do that one like this one again. It already equals 0 for us. Now, so in number 9, we can take out a 2x out of each of these terms. So we're dividing each of these by 2x. I'll be left with 3x plus 4. So looking for that GCF. And then from this one, that could equal 0, or this could equal 0. So x could be 0, or also a negative 4/3, I believe. And then we'll look at 10 and 11 together. And I do have a worksheet for you guys just to practice this for. Because again, we're going to use this for the next lesson we're doing in pre-calc, and getting really comfortable with factoring is going to make that lesson that much better. Because we use factoring quite a bit in our next pre-calc lesson, but not as straightforward as what we see right here. So when I said solve by any method, so in this case, you might think, so factoring or square roots is fine. For whatever reason, I think this factoring with a problem, like maybe not number 11 is more difficult, but 10 you might have forgotten how to factor that. That's okay, you can always just solve this by square root. So you just can't forget about the positive or negative. Now if you're curious, if you wanted to factor this really wouldn't be too bad to factor. We want to multiply to get negative 4, but have that middle term drop out. So that's where the plus 2 and minus 2 come from. So either way is fine with me. I don't have a preference on how you chose to solve them. Now this one, the factoring is a little bit trickier, but still not bad. It's 4x and 4x to get our 16. To get the 9, it's going to be 3 and 3. And then we just do plus and minus to make that cancel. to make that middle term cancel. So we get plus or minus 3/4. Otherwise, if you did it with square roots, you move that 9 over, divide by 16, and so I have x squared equals 9 over 16. When I take the square root of each side, it's the square root of 9, square root of 16, so square root of those are just 3 and 4. So either method is fine with me, I don't have a preference. Okay? All right, so I have a worksheet for you guys here. Just trying to think, I don't know that we need to do, well, I will assign, you guys can do odds. If you need more practice of anything, I would highly recommend you do more, but yeah, why don't you guys, we'll just assign odds for this. Yeah, so odds you guys can do for this worksheet. Yeah, the first two are just factored for you already, so all you need to do is solve them. They're kind of like the first two